trying to figure out how to work on the restaurant instead of work in the restaurant.
Hey everybody, what's going on? My name is DJ and this is the Restaurant Growth Podcast presented by 7 Shifts. And on this show, we sit down with the best minds in the hospitality business and bring you new insights and big ideas to help your restaurant grow. Our guest today is Monte Silva. He's a restaurant coach and speaker who helps restaurateurs find work-life balance in an industry which, let's face it, is notorious for not having much of it. And on this episode, Monte was able to take us through his entire career and kind of speak candidly about when he realized he was burnt out, what he did to solve that, and then how he takes those lessons and helps restaurateurs work on their restaurants, not in their restaurants, with his coaching business. And as always, I'd love to hear from you. Please tell me what you think of the show, who you want to hear on it, or if you have any questions about 7 Shifts, my inbox is open, dj@7shifts.com. So without further ado, here's the conversation with Monte. Hey, Monte, how are you today?
I'm great, DJ. How are you?
I'm really well. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, I'm excited. This is great.
Yeah, I'm excited too. Yeah, we got a lot to cover today, but I really just want to get started. Monte, if you want to just tell everyone who you are and then how you got started in the restaurant industry.
Sure. I'm a restaurant coach now in Tampa, Florida area, but I grew up in Northern California, started in the restaurant industry when I was 15 as a dishwasher, and then kind of worked my way through the kitchen, prep cook, line cook, and then bounced to front of the house and was a busser, server, bartender, DJ, bouncer, did all that. Then I moved to the Caribbean and ran a bar in the Caribbean, and then moved back to Northern Cal, and went into restaurant management. So I had spent about 15 years in the hourly ranks, and then started my management career at 30. From there, I worked for Wolfgang Puck in LA. I was a GM for him. I moved to Nashville. I was in Vegas with him for 4 years. Then I moved to Nashville, and that's where my career, even though I worked for Wolfgang Puck, who was huge, my career really exploded when my time in Nashville. And then COVID hit, and I was the director of restaurants for a group, and I was the only non-family member in the corporate office. And so my position was eliminated, and work was, for the first time in my life, work was tough because Nashville had completely shut down during COVID. And so I pivoted and started coaching.
Amazing. So yeah, you started from the bottom, right in the dish pit, and really worked your way up through pretty much every position.
Yeah, in the front of the house, or in the management level, I was a kitchen manager, bar manager, service manager, beverage director, assistant GM, director of operations.
Okay, so you know your stuff. You've been through it all. So you're really a lifer in the industry, which is rare, but I think pretty much everything you've done.
Yeah, it's you commented on not a lot of lifers. I think that restaurants are definitely a sprint. There's times where you're just full throttle, but restaurants are also, if you're going to have longevity in this business, they're also a marathon. And so you have to figure out, when am I sprinting, and when am I resting, and when am I replenishing my body for the next crazy situation. And I think that that's important to have that perspective, that yes, it is a sprint. Part of the time you're sprinting, but the majority of the time you're on full marathon run.
And we'll definitely get into some more of that kind of balance stuff. But before we go there, I just want to take a little look back and learn a little bit more about your career so far, and what some of those really super formative experiences were. Was it Wolfgang Puck, or what'd you learn? What do you look back on, and kind of what were those formative things?
Yeah, I think that if you become a student of this industry, every situation is a learning opportunity, whether it's a bad environment or a great environment. And so you can learn what to do as well as what not to do during that. So some highlights for me: my very first management job, I was with Chevy's Mexican Restaurant, which was a chain out of California. That's where they started. And I was a brand new manager, and in 1994 we opened the West Covina location, and I was a trainer, and then they promoted me into management, and I was managing there. And what was awesome about Chevy's is two things. Number one, there was a lot of companies when you're hired as a front of the house manager, you might spend, you know, a month training in the kitchen and then some training in the front, and then you're full-time front. And that gives you a good basic understanding of the kitchen and how, what goes on back there. But, and certainly to become a GM, that's a valuable lesson. The great thing about Chevy's was because it wasn't as much of a culinary driven restaurant as some of the other places that I went. The KM, you basically, if you were an assistant manager, you might be the bar manager for a while, then you might be the assistant KM for a while, then you might be the service manager for a while, and you had to do all of those things to become the head kitchen manager, and you had to be a head kitchen manager to become a GM. So it was awesome because it wasn't just a month in the kitchen. It was, I was bar manager, then I was service manager, and then I was assistant KM, and then I was the head KM. And so it was a great learning experience for me to really learn the fundamentals. My first mentor, Tom Bryan, was my director of ops, and he really taught me how to operate a restaurant and how to drive sales as you're in the top line to be able to control your bottom line. So that was a formative time for sure, a brand new manager. And later working for Wolfgang Puck, being a GM for him, I really learned a couple things. One, he was masterful on the floor, as great as he was as a chef, and his food was amazing. Um, he worked the floor better than anyone I've ever seen, and just really created. You know, we provided service and hospitality, but when he was in the room, it was all about hospitality and just really making the guest feel the most important. So that was awesome. The other thing is just really understanding that food needs to be sexy. It needs to be visually attractive, as well as flavor profiles and texture and all that other stuff. So being able to really focus on what the plate looks like, super important. And then after that, I moved to I was with Wolfgang in Vegas for a while, and then after that, I moved to Nashville. I had gone through some burnout early on, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. But when I reemerged in Nashville, there were probably two highlight spots for me. One was the Boundary, which was a restaurant that had been a hipster bar that sold really great pizza, and you could get PBRs really cheap and everything. And they wanted me to flip it to an upscale culinary destination kind of a restaurant. And so I had carte blanche, which was awesome to be able to create the kind of restaurant that, my wife and I would love to dine at. And so focused on a craft cocktail program. We brought in a chef, and we were overnighting fish from Hawaii, and we were getting antelope from a Texas ranch called Broken Arrow Ranch, and we were sourcing great steaks and everything. And I put together a really great wine list. And that restaurant ended up winning best service, best restaurant, best wine list. So it was pretty awesome. So having carte blanche to be able to really put my creativity to work was awesome for me, and really kind of established me in the Nashville area. And then later I had an opportunity to work at Acme Feed and Seed as the general manager. That was a 4-story, $18.5 million a year restaurant with different stuff going on every floor. And so that's where I really learned how to manage my time and really be successful in such a busy restaurant. We were the 31st highest grossing restaurant in the country.
So you've run the gamut, everything from out in the Caribbean to Chevy's Tex-Mex, like the mall restaurant, to, some award-winning and high-volume restaurants. So I imagine through all of that, there are some universal things that you've taken out of that. And we've talked a lot about work-life balance. You mentioned you had some burnout and kind of had to leave Vegas for Nashville. I guess that point in your career is when you realized kind of things were not right and maybe you were sprinting too much. What were some of the telltale signs for you that maybe some other restaurateurs who may be feeling that, or they're not sure if they're at that point yet, that you realize like I have to make a change?
Yeah, so I was actually in LA working for Wolfgang, and I went through a divorce, and I was working from 8. I was overseeing two restaurants. So I was working from 8 a.m. to 4 at one restaurant, and then 5 to midnight at another. Just way too many hours. You know, my one day off, I would go lay on the beach and sleep all day. And so uh, a buddy of mine who had owned a restaurant as well and kind of went through similar burnout, had moved to Vegas and became a captain at a restaurant. Which, if the audience is not familiar with a captain, it's an elevated server position. They have like a 3-man team, and the captain does the schmoozing and selling and hospitality end of it, and then there's a front waiter that does the taking the order and marking the table, and then you have the back waiter that's a little kind of an elevated busser. And so, as a captain, he's like, I'm making as much money as I made in my restaurant. And he said, you can make as much money as you were making as a GM, um, without the stress, without the burnout. And so it was time in my life going through the divorce and not feeling healthy. I was out of shape, and I was having a drink every night, and that whole lifestyle, and just decided that I needed to kind of take a time out. And I didn't really know how to continue in the role that I was in and still fix those issues. And so I did what a lot of people did is, and that's one of the issues that I talk about a lot is making sure that the income level for high execution GMs, can't be lower than the people that work for them. Or you're not going to be able to get anyone to do that. So I took a break and I went back to being a captain. And I was fortunate enough that the Wolfgang people didn't want me to leave the company, and so they brought me to Postrio in the Venetian, and said, "Look, take your time, do what you need to do, and if you want to jump into management, let us know." So that was just being out of shape, the relationships being out of balance, not being exhausted all the time. I was never off. I was always on, and part of that was, a lot of our clientele were celebrities, and they had my cell phone, and so their manager or themselves would call and say, "Hey, we're going to be in tonight. Can you get us a table?" And so I always felt like I had to be in the building.
And being in the building. And what do you think contributed to that? It's like no one gets into something hoping and like, anticipating that's going to take over their entire life and they're going to burn themselves out. And what do you think it is about restaurants in particular that drives people to that point?
Yeah, I think that we're so others focused, that we want to please others. We want them to have a great experience. We're the host of the party every night, and I think that we have such a desire to please people and create life altering memories that we get caught up in that, and then we neglect our own. It's kind of like you've got to be able to put the oxygen mask on yourself before you can help somebody
Yeah.
else.
And it's in the name of hospitality, I think a lot of folks and owners and workers end up neglecting their own needs. And then at the end of the day, what suffers really is what you were trying to do in the first place, which was create memorable experiences and give people good feelings. And then you kind of take that away from yourself.
Yeah, and that whole myth that you have to be an asshole, to your people and throw
That
dishes
too.
at them and stuff like that. That's what I grew up in,
Yeah.
and so there was this need to always be on and never have a bad day. And in my leadership style, I recognize that we're all human beings and we all make mistakes, myself included. And we have to work through those mistakes and get better. But at the same time, um, if you care, I don't care if you make a mistake. It's making careless mistakes where you don't really care about the experience. That's a deeper issue for me. But I think
Absolutely.
there's just that like you said, that false belief that you've got to work 70 hours a week to be successful. And we almost wore that as a badge of courage, like you're not going to outwork me. And then we'd go party all night and, you know, you're not going to out party me either. And we just self-destructed. And, there's a lot of burnout, a lot of depression, a lot of alcoholism, a lot of drug use, a lot of, um, uh, stress that if you don't learn how to manage, it can destroy your life for sure.
Absolutely. So you left management after getting burnt out, went back to the captain role, but eventually found yourself back in operations positions, GM and director of operations. So thinking back to how you ran things before the kind of career change and how you began to run things after that, what were the biggest pillars or the biggest changes that you made in your management style? You found work-life balance, right? Give that to your team as well.
Sure. So for me to find work-life balance, I had to disprove a lot of the false myths that were out there. One of them is working a 70-hour work week. And one of them is you have to underpay your people to make profits. One is marketing is expensive. There's a lot of these false myths out there. And I had to realize those myths needed to change, but also I had to focus. Okay, there's a million things going on in a restaurant, right? We can all get bogged down. What are the most important things that are going to move you forward the best? And I developed really 5 pillars of success, I don't think that these are things that people don't get. I think that everybody, when I name these, everyone's going to go, yeah, 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 yeah. But it's committing to those. I don't think that we uh, fully commit and fully focus our attention on these. And so the first pillar is people, and that is the guest. It's your own team. You have to treat your team the way that you want them to treat the guest. So that's super important. There's the vendors that you work with, and then there's your community, and your community includes the people that live in your surrounding area. Are you giving back? Are you engaged? Are you the mayor of the city? Uh, and then also your home life. What does that look like? That's part of your community, and how does that look? So that's the first pillar, people. The second one is product, and I think that product is not just food and beverage, it's ambiance, it's your brand. And so you've got to be able to focus on your brand and not trying to be all things to all people, but really kind of hone in who you are and what you're about, and what's important. Um, and then you've got your systems, which I think people and systems are the two biggest areas if you want to create some work-life balance to focus on. You've got to have systems in place that other people can run. I use the McDonald's analogy. I'm not going to say the quarter pounder is my favorite hamburger on the planet, but whether you eat in Tokyo or Paris or New York, it's going to taste the same. There's systems in place to create that. And so you've got to have, if you build this perfect box and then you want to grow more locations, you've got to build the perfect box, put the systems in place that work, and then you've got to be able to, find the right people to execute those. And so those are 3 pillars: people, product, systems, and then sales. And I have a different philosophy. I think we get so caught up in cutting, cutting, cutting. Let's cut labor. Let's cut food costs. Let's do this. Let's do that. That we make our jobs way harder than they have to be. And that can create some burnout. But also, we're not setting up our business for self-sustaining, and we're not setting it up for growth. And so, focusing on sales is a big, big piece of the puzzle. And then, lastly, is profits. And I think that the old P&L model of you got to run a certain percentage of margin of prime costs, and then you've got to run certain controllable costs and certain uncontrollable costs. I think that model is broken, and honestly, it's never been fully successful because the money made in a restaurant has been so limited following that model that I think that really breaking out of that, and coming up with the idea that you don't bring percentages to the bank, you bring dollars. And so, you want to drive the top line as much as possible. So those are the five pillars that I created to make me super successful. And then I used predominantly people and systems to really create that work-life balance. And for me, I think that we all have to determine what does work-life balance mean to them. Each person has a different viewpoint. My wife was a school teacher, and weekends off and holidays and vacation in the summer was work-life balance for her. And then figuring out how to do lesson plans, at home and not bring all the work home. There's work-life balance there. It's very different than a restaurateur's work-life balance. And even if you're in the industry, we all have different things. For me, I was working a ton, um, and I never turned off. And then I would work for 6 months at a full sprint, and then take a week's vacation and go lay on a beach somewhere in Florida. And then I would go back and sprint for 6 months again, and then take a week off. And that's not really work-life balance either for me. And so, three major things that I did. First, when I got to Acme Feed and Seed, which was the $18.5 million a year restaurant, I realized I can't be on every floor at the same time, and I want days off. And so I really focused on two things. I focused on my own personal time management, and I came up with some things to really help me do that. And I'm happy to share some of those as well. But from certain time management things. And then the other piece was really developing my people so that I didn't have to micromanage. I didn't have to do everything. I didn't have to be in the building all the time. And I really focused on developing key players and key positions and giving them specific responsibilities and communicating really well with them and coaching them along the way. And as that got better and better, I found myself not having to be in the restaurant. Even though I was in Nashville, where we also had celebrities that had my cell phone number, I got to the point where they could still text me or call me, but then I would go to whoever was working, and I felt comfortable that they were going to get a great experience.
Right. You could say, forward it to the next,
Right.
one of the country singers that's in town. Could
Yeah.
say, you trust them. And then what was the third?
And then the third was, for me, work-life balance was not working my butt off for 6 months and then going to the beach. And so
Right.
we moved to Tampa last February, a year ago, and now, in fact, after this podcast, we're going to get ready and we're going to go to the beach for the day. So there's a way to be able to unplug without waiting 6 months.
I guess what you're saying, it kind of comes down to, before you can achieve it, you have to figure out what it means to you.
Right.
And think about what you need out of life that involves work and how it fits in. And in your coaching, what are some of the more common things that people are kind of looking for in the restaurant industry?
Sure. Well, let me answer the second part of your question. I think you asked me, how do I make sure that my management teams had work-life balance as well? And so, I created some things, some systems. I told them, look, if the restaurant is burning down, or there's substantial money missing out of the safe, or there's a gas leak and you smell it, or there's been a major accident, call me. Pick up the phone. That's an urgent and important thing. I learned this urgent, important stuff from Stephen Covey. And so that's a call me. That's a oh crap, I need to call. If it is urgent but not as critical, shoot me a text and just explain what happened, and then I can determine if I need to call you. If it is important but not urgent, but you don't want to forget about it because it's important, shoot me an email, and when I get time to check that, I will. And so that's how I treated my managers. If I came onto a shift and there's $1,000 missing out of the safe, which fortunately there never was, but that's just an example. Well, I would immediately call the closing manager and say, "Hey, what happened last night?" But I respected people's time off. Now, with that, respecting their days off, I also had very high expectations that when they're in the building, they're focused on the restaurant. And if you can do that, if you can focus on the restaurant 50 hours a week and you're doing what you need to do during that time, and you're not just getting through a shift, then there's less, oh no, 911s that are happening that somebody's going to call you on your day off. And so, if you don't post your schedule when you're at work, and schedule was due yesterday, you're going to get a call. Hey, you got to post a schedule. But if you're doing what you need to do, you're not focused on something else while you're in the building, then you should absolutely be able to not focus on the restaurant. Obviously, a GM or an owner has to be a little more available. They can't just blow off the restaurant on their days off, but having that kind of mindset really helps. So that's kind of how giving manager 2 days off in a row, granting requests so they can have a life outside of the restaurant when they need time off, not scheduling them clopens, where you're in the restaurant till 1 or 2, and then you're back at 8 or 9. Super important. So that's kind of how I did that. But as far as I think a lot of the people that reach out to me can identify with my story of trying to figure out how to work on the restaurant instead of work in the restaurant. And I have clients that have kids and they don't want to be stuck at the restaurant every day. I have clients that don't want to talk. They're husband and wife partners, and they don't want to talk about the restaurant 24/7, and they want downtime to be a couple. And so that's a lot of it. Sometimes it's now a big thing is how do we get quality employees and during the Great Resignation when nobody wants to work, or how do we still expect great work out of people under the new normal of creating work-life balance for them, and creating finding out what they're excited about, and bringing that into their job and their responsibility. For you, if you love interviewing people and talking to people, you're able to bring podcasts to work.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
and I think that being able to create that love or something in the business is super super important. So a lot of it's that. Some of it is what does marketing look like now in this age of technology? What does service and hospitality look like in this age of technology? I don't think that tech will ever fully replace things, but in the
No.
case of 7 Shifts, you certainly make operators' lives easier, being able to do that first piece that I mentioned of time management, and really being able to put systems in place that work. So that's why I'm such a big fan of 7 Shifts, and
Thank you.
excited to be part of what you guys are doing.
Yeah. Just to take it back just a little bit, talking about those systems where you were saying, things that are urgent, important, and urgent, call me. Urgent, not important, text me, whatever it was. I think I butchered it. But I imagine that too just also gives people a sense of ownership, because without those in place, I think a lot of the time, especially if you're in the restaurant all the time, people just coming to you constantly. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? They never learn. You get burnt out. And they don't feel like they're actually a part of something because they're not making decisions for themselves. Would you say that that's true?
Yeah, a lot of times when they would come to me on the floor, or in the kitchen or wherever I was, and they would explain what happened, which is great. I definitely, as a GM, or as a director of operations, I certainly wanted to know what was going on. But sometimes I would flip it back on them and say, well, how would you handle this? And so um, being able to be that coach on, during game time, I think is super important. And then as their answers tend to line up with yours, they feel this sense of empowerment, and they also feel this confidence in their own decision making. And I think that's super important. I think that when you're evaluating reviews online and different things like that, if you're using Ovation or other platforms to to be able to evaluate what's going on in your restaurant, being able to use those as teaching moments in your lineups and in your manager meetings as well.
Yeah, something takes me back to my parents when I was growing up. If I asked them how to do something that they knew I knew how to do, they'd be like, if we weren't here, what would you do? And then you realize, oh, actually, I do know, and you realize you're using it as a
Right.
crutch. And then it doesn't give you a sense of accomplishment when you use it that way.
Well, and you're not
I don't want
managing
to
if you make every decision.
exactly. I don't want to keep you from the beach too much longer, but just a couple more questions, really. Coaching with you, what does that look like for a restaurant owner right now?
So there's a few things. We have a website that has some different ways of working with us. We've I've started a cooperative where there are other restaurant coaches. We each have our own businesses, but we share this website to help promote each other because and honestly, we all believe in those five pillars. We all want to serve our restaurant brothers and sisters in a way that not only makes their life better, their employees' lives better, but also better guest experiences for the world. And right now, we certainly need some love in this world, and I think restaurants are a great way to show that. And so the site is hashtag restaurateur.com. It's spelled out hashtag, and then it's restaurateur with no N. It's restaurateur.com. And on there, you can, I do coaching of restaurant owners where they bring me on for 90 days. And I've learned that if I just do the project for someone, it's kind of like answering the question for your manager. They never learn. And so a lot of it is interactive, 90 days of really just getting the owner uh, changing their mindset. James Clear wrote a great book called Atomic Habits, where he talks about take 67 days to not only,
I think I have it.
yeah, uh, great book. It's one of the best books I've
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
and so 67 days to unlearn a bad habit and create a new habit in its place. And so um, the 90 days is, you've got a week or so to ramp up. You've got 67 days to learn your systems and everything, and then you have a couple weeks to really walk fully in that while I'm still.
Work out the kinks and get used
Yeah.
to it and that stuff.
So what I typically do is I find out what are your needs, what is the restaurant, what are your goals? Are you growing? We started off with one client who just wanted to not be in the restaurant every day, and we spent 90 days really focused on getting them to that point, and then they realized that their GM was not the right fit, and they hired me for another 90 days to get their GM up to speed where they were. And then they said, "Hey, look, we want to be able to work 2 days a week and manage the building from home the rest of the time." They had kids under the age of 10. And then they got to a point where, like, well, now we want to manage remotely and would be in the restaurant. And they live in another state now from where the restaurant is. And now they're actually working on growing the brand to multiple locations. And so they continued to rehire me each 90-day period with a new set of priorities and goals. And they're super happy because every 90 days they reach those goals. And then they're like, okay, to have that vision of, hey, I want to open 10 restaurants, when at the beginning they're like, I can't even lift my head up because I'm so focused on this one issue and this one restaurant. And so being able to come alongside a restaurant owner for 90 days is one of the things I do. And it's, surprisingly affordable because I'm not just doing all the work. I'm not just giving a man a fish, I'm teaching them how to fish. I also do group coaching where I can bring in a group of people, and it's more of a mastermind, and that's a year-long program. And then I also have books for sale. I have a couple of ebooks right now one on hospitality, and one called Shift Happens, which, what do we do
And we
now?
could have,
COVID
I feel
has,
like we should have came up with that one.
yeah, yeah. So, it's about what do we do, what's the new normal, and I debunk those myths that we've had in the industry for so long. Both of those are available on my site. You
Nice.
can purchase, you can book a block of time with me by phone or Zoom. There's a lot of different creative ways to work with me.
And where can folks find you? Where's the most reliable place to get in touch with you right now?
So definitely the website, uh, www.restaurateur.com. Follow me on LinkedIn. I write a blog there every week.
Yes, for great follow on LinkedIn for
Yeah,
sure.
that's where you and honestly, LinkedIn's been great. It's probably
Yeah.
produced almost all of my connections in the industry as well as my clients.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're a restaurant owner, restaurateur, manager, director of ops, LinkedIn has got a lot of great stuff going on for the industry, which I didn't think there would be when I first kind of got into it, but I've been pleasantly surprised at the community over
Yeah,
there.
it's been great.
But yeah, that's all I got the time for today. And I know you have some sun and some sand to get to.
You have a 3-year-old son, so
Monte.
my priorities have changed, being a dad.
Ah,
So now it's yesterday I was throwing the football with him, got home from
nice.
church, and had some family over, and his cousins came over, and we played some football in the backyard. And today we're going to the beach.
Yes. And I think that's something that a lot of restaurant owners would love to be able to do as well. But they need to get out of the restaurant first.
Right. Work on the
Awesome.
business, don't work in it.
Absolutely. Monte, thank you so much for coming
Thanks,
on today.
DJ. It's been great.
Thanks again for checking out the Restaurant Growth Podcast. We're glad to have you as a listener. For more great content from 7Shifts, check out our website and blog, 7shifts.com/blog. You can also hit us on all of the social media platforms at 7Shifts. Thanks.